Have you ever thought about how different your life could be if you'd just been born somewhere else? Even if you change nothing else about you, simply modifying the place you live could turn your entire existence upside down. And you don't even have to change countries to observe this effect. A different place in the same country or even the same city could have drastic consequences on your quality of life. Confused? Well, this is the concept of geographical inequality. In the modern world, we've started recognizing so many types of inequalities: gender-based, racial, economic, and so many more. Yet one type of inequality still missing from contemporary discourse is geographical inequality. Now, as the name suggests, geographical inequality, also referred to as spatial inequality, refers to the uneven distribution of goods and services across geographical locations. It's so embedded in our modern world that we consider it entirely normal. But have you ever stopped and thought about, does it really need to be this way? Do we really need to prevent the majority of the world from a shot at their full potential just because they were born in the wrong place? Before we can answer that question, let's learn a bit more about what geographical inequality really is. It comes in three types. The first is international, and the one we're most used to hearing about. Internationally, first world or developed countries are much more privileged compared to third world or developing ones. For example, the world's richest continent, North America, has a GDP per capita 20 times higher than its poorest, Africa. The second is national level spatial inequality. Within the same country, the smallest cities and the biggest ones can often be poles apart. For example, India's richest and most developed state has a 10 times greater access to electricity than its poorest. And the third is metropolitan level spatial inequality. Within the same city, different neighborhoods can often feel like entirely different worlds. For example, in an aggregate study of US metropolitan areas, it was found that the worst neighborhoods had a homicide rate 5 times higher than the safest ones. So now, what does all this mean? First of all, none of these are cherry-picked examples. You can see geographical inequality lurking silently everywhere you look. To understand this in more depth, let's go over two different people from two very different parts of India. Ramesh is from Chhattisgarh, which is a state in central India and is one of India's least developed and poorest states. And Suresh is from Chandigarh, which is a city in northern India. It's rich, glamorous, modern. It's basically like the Boston of India, if that makes sense. So this might be confusing to non-Indian viewers, but think of it as comparing Wyoming and Boston. And follow along. So on my left side is Wyoming. Here, the deck is already stacked against Ramesh from the moment he's born. 224 out of every 100,000 women that give birth die during the process of childbirth. Compare that to just 25 per 100,000 in Chandigarh, and you can see that the discrepancy is 10 times as much. Now, even when he's born, Ramesh has a 3 times higher chance of dying as an infant, just because of the place where he was born. If he survives his infancy, his life won't be much better. Only 51% of households in Chhattisgarh have access to electricity, compared to 97% in Chandigarh, which again, we're talking about the same country here. Similarly, 30% of households in Chhattisgarh do not have access to water in their premises and often have to walk long distances to get it. Similarly, Chandigarh, on the other hand, Chandigarh has a water access rate of 99%, which means that only 1% of the households in Chandigarh have to walk long distances to get their water. Now, even if he manages to survive through all of this, he's also much more likely to fall victim to child labor. 33 million children in extremely underdeveloped parts of India have to work to support their families each year. Now compare that to Suresh. In his modern and prosperous life, He has a wide variety of schools to choose from. And based on the average income of a resident of Chhattisgarh, he can also easily afford any supplies, books, or stationery he needs. By the time he graduates, he'll have a much better awareness of his higher education options, and he'll also be much more aware of how to pursue his future career. Now compare that to Ramesh, and when he graduates, only 1/4 of his classmates will know how to solve a grade 4 level math problem. Let me repeat that. By the time Ramesh, in one of India's poorest states, graduates high school, 75% of his classmates will not even be able to do a grade 4 level math problem. That's how badly the system is failing students in underdeveloped states. So, what does any of this have to do with their future life? A lot, it turns out. Over the course of their lives, Ramesh can expect to earn 25 times less, while Suresh can also expect to live 10 to 12 years longer, just because of the place they were born. I can't emphasize this point enough. But what causes this in the first place? Well, there's a simple concept I like to call cycles of inequality. Think about it. A person is born in a geographically disadvantaged place. Because of that, they don't get adequate access to healthcare, education, resources, job opportunities, etc. And that leaves their potential stunted, which means they can't fulfill everything they were destined to do. Because of that, they have to they have to live in the same place and they can't move to a place with better options or prospects for their family. And their family is thus born in the same place and goes through the exact same ordeals and challenges that they did. This way, geographical inequality is perpetuated for centuries. Okay, you say, that's how it's perpetuated. But how does it really begin? What makes one place better at attracting some talent than others? For that, the main culprit is an economic principle called agglomeration economies. It refers to the clustering of businesses and individuals in particular areas. Now, we see this all the time in the real world. Think about New York. It's the major hub for banking in the USA, and indeed the world. Los Angeles, on the other hand, is the major home for all the film producers, while Silicon Valley is the global epicenter for tech. All of these are examples of clustering. Take Silicon Valley, for example. All it was in the 60s was a bunch of semiconductor companies. But those companies started a few offshoots, a few startups that made the tech environment a bit broader. A few other graduates from other parts of the US came there and started working, founding their own companies, which again made the landscape a bit broader and it catered more to other types of tech enthusiasts. More people from all over the USA and now from even other parts of the world started coming in. They founded companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and so many others, all in this part of the world. So now, if you're a recent tech graduate just getting out of university, it makes sense to go to Silicon Valley because that's where all the jobs are. That's where all your future prospects lie. You would not go to somewhere in the middle of rural Wyoming because you know there are no options there. And that, on the face, is a perfectly logical choice. You just want what's best for your future prospects. But then you have to consider every person going to Silicon Valley is stealing development from less developed areas. And this is the basic principle behind what perpetuates geographical inequality and causes it in the first place. The thing about this process called a brain drain, is that it occurs even on scales we don't notice. We often hear about brain drain on an international scale. People from lower income countries emigrate to higher income countries like the United States or the UK or other ones to get better jobs. But this also happens within nations. As I just mentioned, Wyoming to Silicon Valley, for example. And it also happens within cities. And all of these slightly shift the power imbalance with each person that moves. And if this goes on for a long time, that can cause major effects on which industries are located in which parts of the country. So what does all of this have to do with, let's say, geographical inequality becoming a huge issue? I mean, some places are always going to be better at some things, right? Well, yeah, but the problem with geographical inequality is that it compounds and fast. Silicon Valley is nowhere near the scale it was 10 years ago. It's grown much bigger. And to illustrate that, let's take another example. 10 years ago, India's worst state was 15 times worse than its best one at providing access to water, which is already a pretty big disparity considering safe, clean drinking water is something that everyone needs. But now, 10 years later, India's worst state is 45 times worse than its best one at doing the exact same thing. So, in the span of 10 years, the discrepancy between the best and worst states has more than tripled. And that's a cause for concern because that means that the more we delay in trying to prevent geographical inequality, the greater its effects are going to become and the harder it will become to stop. The difference between the best and the worst places, and by best and worst, I don't mean the best to live in or the worst for in one particular statistic. I mean the best and worst overall and in specific industries. The difference between the best and worst is only going to grow. So now that you know this, we should all step up and take action. There are three things we can do. The first is activism. Because let's be real, long-term permanent change has to come from the government. And there's no better way to encourage your government to invest in historically neglected areas than by campaigning and petitioning them. The second way is launching your own organization. For example, take the example of females in STEM. Historically, they were an underrepresented group. But for the past few decades, specifically targeted programs like financial aid, scholarships, and targeted mentoring, etc., have slowly decreased the discrepancy. If we can do something similar for spatial inequality, like, for example, taking kids from disadvantaged places and matching them up with mentors that can provide access to future opportunities, that could be a huge step forward. And thirdly, if you do nothing else, because of course, the first two options are pretty time consuming, and not everyone has time to dedicate to every single issue they encounter. The least you can do is tell your friends and family that this issue exists. Because obviously, right now, it's not in the public consciousness, which means that we aren't discussing it. And the more we start to do that, the closer we step to a time where everyone, regardless of where they're born, can participate equally in the geographical inequalities of the 21st century and contribute their most to the economic, social, and technological benefits that the 21st century will bring. Thank you.